So thank you so much for joining me this afternoon, Sian, to talk about the Derby Book Festival. Just to start off with, can you introduce yourself for the students, obviously, and just sort of tell them what your role is at the festival?
Right, okay. I'm Sian Hoyle and I am the Executive Director. And I also am co-founder of the festival. I set it up with Jenny Denton. The first festival was in 2015, so we've now been running it. What we should have had this year would have been our 6th festival.
Mm-hmm. And what made you and Jenny found the festival? What made you create it?
Well, Jenny and I'd worked together on another arts project in the city, and really enjoyed working together, and we were both in book groups, we were both book lovers, and we were just sitting in quad actually one evening with a glass of wine, and we were just talking about books and got on to talking about festivals, and I'd never been to a book festival, and we just sort of thought, wouldn't it be great if there was one in Derby that we could go to?
Mm-hmm.
And Jenny, being Jenny, said, right, let's do it, let's organise one. And we'd both sort of worked on events before. I mean, I'd worked in marketing and I had organised events, so it wasn't as if we knew nothing at all, but it was just that idea. And then once you've had the idea, you start talking to people, and then it all sort of snowballed from there.
Yeah. So what were the first sort of things you started to do in the weeks after you decided to do it?
The first thing really was to start making contacts in the city, because obviously you've got to sound people out. You know, just because you think it's a good idea doesn't mean everybody else does. And of course, there were 2 of us with no venues.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you just need to start somewhere. So we started talking to people like the city council, to the venues, Quad, Dada, the theatre, talked to people we knew in the city, Marketing Derby, friends, you know, just people that we thought we valued their opinion, we knew that they knew people, and to an extent we knew people. And quite quickly we sort of started asking people to get involved in terms of the management side. So one of the first things was to find a chair for the festival, and Jenny spotted an article in a magazine that Marketing Derby produce, and it was a profile of Liz Fothergill, who'd recently been named East Midlands Businesswoman of the Year. And she ran a business called Pennine Healthcare in the city. But right at the end of the article, which was really about the fact that she was stepping back from that because she was sort of semi-retiring as sort of the lead person, was going to be on to sort of, I think she was becoming chief executive. She it just mentioned that she trained as a librarian and how much she loved books, and how much she was looking forward in her semi-retirement to reading more books. So Jenny said, this is our woman. And we didn't know her, never met her, didn't really know anybody who knew her, and just dropped her an email, and she arranged to meet us and said yes, and that was it.
So what's the role of the chair?
Well, she manages our board of trustees. We've got a board of trustees of I think there's about 12 of them, across various roles, like there's finance, there's legal, there's all sorts of different roles. But she's not just a figurehead, she's a very, very hands-on chair. She's incredibly well read. She adores books and is always suggesting new authors to us and ideas. And she has been incredible in the way she's gone about talking to businesses in the city about the festival and engaging with them and encouraging them to be sponsors. And sponsorship is absolutely vital to the festival. And of course the university is one of our main funders. So she's she is the figurehead, she is this spokesperson, but she's also very, very engaged on a day-to-day basis, and we see her most weeks to talk through ideas.
Oh, that's fab, yeah. Because you were saying just before we started recording, actually, that it's not just like the 9 days of the festival, it's sort of a program of events, planning for the festival across the whole year.
It is, and there are specific phases to the year. So at the moment we are in the phase where we are bidding, which is writing the Arts Council application, which we submit on the 1st of November, because they give us the bulk of our funding comes from the Arts Council. And then we're also currently programming, so we're starting to look at all the publishers' catalogues, and trying to think of things that will be of interest to people next June. And we know our audience fairly well now to know what sort of books they'll be interested in, what sort of events will be popular with them, but we're always looking to new audiences. And who knows what's going to happen by next June. We've got to plan for it as if things will be back to normal, but at the same time making contingency plans for, well, if they're not back to normal, you've got reduced capacities in venues, or certain authors can't come, what do you do? So it's slightly different this year. And also I think it's 75% of our audience is 50 plus, which means that those are the sorts of people who might not be coming back to events next year, in which case we need to be looking at expanding the programme, which we're always trying to do anyway, but maybe try and engage with a younger audience, because there are a lot of younger people come to book festivals. We don't get a lot of students there, and really it's sort of 35 plus our audience in the main, and we don't want it to be like that. We want it to change, so we're just gonna have to see how it goes.
Yeah, we can make this a call out to all the students who are watching, sort of like go to the festival, however like will be next year. And that's a really good like segue into the next question I had, was how do you program the festival? Like, where do you start?
Well, it is looking at the publishers' catalogues. Publishers produce a catalogue usually twice a year. So at the moment, they're just starting to publish the one that takes you through from January to June next year. So all the books that have sort of come out this year in hardback will be going into paperback probably next year. So if they're out now, we'd still be interested. So it's very important to us at the moment what is doing well, because those books will be out in paperback by next spring. So they'll sell even more copies. If they're doing well in hardback, they're going to sell even more. And we know the sorts of things our audience are interested in. So what we do is we produce a pitch, an invitation, a general one, and then we tailor it for each event, each author we're interested in. And between now and, well, right up until March, really, when we're finalising the programme, we'll be sending those pitches out. And hoping that we're going to be successful in securing the authors. So it's looking at the catalogues. We get a magazine called The Bookseller, which we get every week. I think I've got a copy of it to hand somewhere. Yeah, The Bookseller.
Yeah, we love The Bookseller.
We get weekly. We also get a daily email from The Bookseller. So you're constantly looking at what's coming up, what were they talking about, what sort of things are exciting in the publishing world. We also read all if we can, the reviews of books each week in the broadsheets, so you know a bit more detail about what they are and what reviewers are saying about them. I mean, this year we'd actually, when lockdown happened on the 23rd of March, we were days away from going to print with the programme. The whole programme of 100 events had been designed.
Yeah.
And if you look on our website, you can actually see you can have a look at the programme we would have had.
Mm-hmm.
But we never went to print because we'd have spent a lot of money, probably £8,000 on printing a programme which would never have seen the light of day.
Yeah.
So thank goodness we didn't get that far.
Yeah.
But that's where we would have been. So we've got all of those authors who haven't come this year. We've actually, first job was to look at those and say which of these will still be relevant, because some events won't be. You know, I mean, we could have Bernadine Evaristo. We would love to have Bernadine Evaristo win the Booker Prize coming back. But by the time next June comes, the book will be 2 years old. She'll probably be on to her next book. So it could be we will still invite her. Yeah. But she might be talking about a different book.
Yeah, that's really interesting how it's almost like you're also kind of like almost trend forecasting specifically for your audience now. Yeah. And is that obviously in the first year, how did you go about doing that without sort of knowing quite who you were appealing to?
Well, we didn't in the first year, really. We couldn't, because it really was very much about what are we interested in, you know. And, you know, we had similar tastes, Jenny and I, and obviously Liz informed that, and the rest of the trustees. So everybody would throw ideas in, but you become more, hopefully, you become more attuned to what you think your audience would like and what will be different and what they'll be interested in. For instance, you know, lockdown will have changed people's ideas about the world. You know, there may be, hopefully there'll be a lot more books about health and well-being, about dealing with crises, you know, spending more time in nature, cooking differently. You know, I think there'll be all sorts of, there'll be new books that will reflect that, but there'll also be audiences who will be more interested in those subjects in a way that we could never have predicted.
That's really interesting. Yeah, because that's probably a sort of result of COVID and the lockdown that we wouldn't really think of, that idea of it's going to completely change how people think about everything they engage with in a way.
Yes, and poetry, you know, there's a lot more poetry being read. I think there's a lot more audio books being listened to. I mean, I certainly, when I walk now, I listen to audio books and podcasts, which I didn't do before. And I think there will be lots of changes that we've all made that we're not even really aware of how they've changed the way we do things. And of course, publishing takes a while, so you don't immediately get those books that reflect that being published. And television programmes don't reflect them because they've all got to be made. So there is a delay in that. So it could be that it'll start by next June, but it could be the year after before you've really got that big change happening.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the questions I'm really curious of, and I wonder if some of the students are, is like how you run the logistics and practicalities of a book festival. So kind of like on the day of events, like what are the sort of things you're dealing with?
Well, you've obviously got to plan for that ahead of time. So, I mean, we're a very small team. There's only 2 of us at the moment. There were 3 of us, and there'll be 2 of us probably for a few months yet, because at the moment, obviously, we don't really know whether we'll definitely have a festival. I mean, we're obviously planning for it, but we've got an army of volunteers. We've got 80 volunteers, many of whom have been with us since the start, 6 years ago. And we do recruit each year. We do get new volunteers in, but we need to plan for them to run the events for us. So basically on the day, you know, you'll arrive at a venue probably at least an hour before the event. You've got to get the stage set up. So you've got pop-up banners to put up. You've got this, you know, the table and the chairs and the water and everything you need on the stage. Waterstones arrive, they have to set their books up. So there's tablecloths we put out. Then there's reserved seats to be, you know, things to be put on seats so that people know who's sitting where. The author arrives about an hour before with their an interviewer, so they have a chat in the green room beforehand. So you have to make sure they've got refreshments laid on, and then they have to do a sound check half an hour before the event, and then go back to the green room. So you have to make sure that works. Sometimes they've got slides to show, which have to be, make sure that you have a run through of those so that all works. And then at the end of it, you have the book signing, which all has to be managed. And if they want a dedication, you have to have post-its with the right name written out. So there's all of that, which is all managed by our volunteers. So, and then it has to be cleared. And then the next one, now, obviously next year, depending where we're up to with COVID, you know, we could have reduced capacities, we could have cleaning to be done between events. So whilst at the moment we have usually about an hour and a half between events, we may need to build in more time. But there's a lot that happens behind the scenes before those people walk into the theatre, the cinema, to actually see that hour's event, which hopefully people don't see all the stuff that's going on behind. But and then you've got to get the author to, you know, you have to know what time the train's arriving, you have to pick them up from the station, get them to the venue, get them back afterwards. So there's an awful lot of planning needs to take place. Every single, and we've got 100 events usually over 9 days.
And generally speaking, with like managing authors and stuff like that, and travel, and you know, the sort of like logistics of all that, is that the publisher or the publicist will do that, or do you guys do that as well?
We liaise with the publicist. We rarely have contact directly with the author until they actually arrive at the station. We usually do it all through the publicist. So the publicist usually will book the train tickets. We usually book the hotels in Derby, but not many authors usually stay over. They usually, because it usually coming from London, they can get there and back 90 minutes. So most of them will do that. But the publicist is absolutely crucial to it. So they'll provide us with all the background information, the photos, the copy for the programme, and they make all the arrangements with the author, and then they arrive. And that's the first time we really have contact with them. Some authors are different. Some want to be in contact with you, but most of them aren't until the day they get there.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, is it different for like more local authors or self-published?
Yes, it is different with more local authors, because most of our local authors we know personally. We've developed a relationship with them. We've watched their careers. We've been to their book launches at Waterstones. You know, it's easier to meet up with them to discuss events. So yes, it is different then. We still have to deal with the publicist, because obviously the publicist still needs to know what they're doing. But yes, it is different.
And do you have any many events with self-published authors?
To be honest, we haven't. We have had some, but we do have a problem with programming self-published authors, because of the quality control. It sounds awful to say that, but unless they're fairly well established, you know, the problem is these days, or not the problem, the wonderful thing in many ways is that anybody can get published. You know, if you write a book today, you can get it online tonight. You know, everybody can publish their own work, and we are inundated with requests from people to include them in the programme, and it's very difficult to know, because it may sound good on paper, but we can't read every single book that we're going to include in the programme. So we do have to make decisions, and we have included self-published, but it is more difficult to include them. That's the problem. That's the reality.
Yeah. I was going to ask before we move on, actually, you were talking about you sort of pitch to authors. Do you pitch to more than you can program to
Oh
anticipate?
God, yes. Oh, yes. You have no idea. I mean, you have no idea how many rejections we get.
How many do you think a year? Do you know how many a year you sort of will ask?
I don't, I've never quantified it. In fact, last year, annoyingly, because I think we had the best program we've ever had, and I would urge you to go on our website and look at the program, because I'm incredibly proud. We are incredibly proud of the program. We had fewer last year. Now, I don't know if that's because we're getting older and people know us and we've got a bit of a better reputation, but it felt like we weren't getting as many rejections. We were getting more acceptances, but I don't know if that was just how it felt or whether that's the reality. I've not really done an analysis of it. I mean, certainly I would say that you probably get, even then last year, 60% rejections and 40% acceptances, but it was certainly certainly worse than that in previous years. So it's horrible, and sometimes you just don't get an answer at all, which is a rejection. And then you think, my God, it must be 3 months since I wrote to them about so and so. And sometimes it'll still come right, because sometimes publicists don't actually do anything about putting a schedule of events together until quite late on, because then they'll think, okay, this book's coming out in March, I'm going to schedule all my events from March to June, and during that and I'm not going to plan it until February. So you don't hear till very late, and you think, oh, I bet it's not going to happen. Then all of a sudden it does, and some are very, very late in coming, and sometimes you think, my God, how am I going to squeeze them in, because I've only got a small space left, and they're going to sell out in that. They could do double that. So it's a bit of a nightmare when that happens, because you don't want to say no to somebody you desperately want.
Yeah, I bet. We've touched on this a little bit, actually, but I was going to ask how COVID's impact the festival, and obviously you said the program just couldn't go ahead. But how do you think that might play out in the future? We've touched on it, but do you think it might be that you have to move some events online, or?
Well, in a way we did, because when we had to cancel in March, it was actually April when we didn't go to print, because obviously nobody knew how long lockdown would be for, and it seems weird now, but actually when we went into lockdown in March, we did still think there was a glimmer of a chance we'll be able to do a festival in June. You look back and think, how could you possibly have thought that? But you did, because nobody knew what they were dealing with. So we actually cancelled, I think, probably mid-April, and then we decided we'd try and do some author interviews online. So again, if you look at the website, you'll see there's a section called DBF at Home, and I think we've got about 10 author interviews that we did on Zoom, that we posted online. They're shorter than usual events. They're about half an hour each, but just a few of the authors, because obviously we had 100, and so we just had 10 of them who we contacted to ask if they'd do events. And people saw them. They were all free. They got a decent number of hits, and of course when COVID happened and we went into lockdown, that was all that was available. We were all watching stuff online then. Our feeling is now that people got a bit weary of it over the summer. Now, maybe that was partly because you were able to go outside more, you didn't do as much inside, and we weren't in the same lockdown. If things are going to tighten up again and the weather gets cooler, then we think that people might well be more happy to watch digital again. And I know that lots of festivals have gone down that route, and have put up a paywall as well. I mean, at the moment Cheltenham Festival's on, and they've got a paywall. I think it's £20 if you buy a ticket and then you've got access to everything up till the end of the year. So what we're thinking at the moment is we will try to do some live events if we can, and we are currently, this is hot off the press, we are currently planning 2 events in October and November, which we haven't started promoting yet. In fact, straight after this, I'm going to a meeting to discuss one of them.
Fabulous.
They may not happen, but at the moment, we're hoping that one of them will probably go on sale next week. So what we try and do is live stream the events as well. That may not be possible for both of these events, but we might try and live stream one of them. And I think for next June, we'll probably try and do more live streaming of events, because I don't think our audience will necessarily want to come back, but they might be prepared to watch things if they know they're happening.
Yeah, and I think, and you sort of mentioned as well that venue capacity might not be 100% anyway, so it might be the easiest way for people to still be able to go if they can't be there in person.
That's the planning. I mean, we've not absolutely definitely decided that yet, but that's the plan at the moment. And our venues are able to live stream. They've got the technologies that they can do that, which is great. So I think that's probably the way to go forward.
That sounds great. Just so the students know, what are the key venues you tend to use in the city? Our
main venue is Quad. I say that, I mean, I say it's our main venue. We probably do just as many events now at Dada as well, but it's always been the one that has had the most in the past, and probably it probably just still does have slightly more. But what we do at Dada is we have events during the week, but we also take over Dada for the day. I don't know if you know Dada. It's a dance centre in town. I know the dance students at the university are based there. And we have a programme of events all day on Sunday, just in Dada. We don't have events anywhere else. We use the theatre. We've usually had 2 or 3 of the bigger events in the theatre. The museum, we usually have 3 or 4 events at Derby Museum. But then we've used smaller venues. We've used the university, the big lecture theatres. We've used those particularly for the schools events. We have secondary school events. But we've also used, oh gosh, my mind's gone blank now. Art Corps, we've done events at Art Corps. We've done events at Landau Forte School in their theatre. Libraries.
So it's really across, it's across the city.
It is. They're mainly city centre, but we also have used venues just outside the city, and a Cathedral Quarter hotel. We're hoping that the Silk Mill, obviously that'll be open by next year, so we'll be able to use the Silk Mill again. So yeah, I mean, all over the place, and we are keen to try and get them more out into communities. We're not just going to be city centre, we want to be out there as well. Yeah,
that's fab. So the next question I had was, what are the best things about running a book festival?
I mean, without doubt, it's the festival itself.
Yeah.
Because it just has an amazing atmosphere, and just to, for it's all come to fruition, to actually have it. You've worked all year towards this 9-day festival, and just to share the joy that people are feeling at the events. I mean, if you've never been to, I mean, everybody's been to festivals these days, and it is a very special feeling that you're all sharing something together. You're all loving that particular author or the book, or maybe just wanting to find out about an author in a book that you've not read yet. But it's just a very special experience. So I mean, that's that highlight of it. But just the planning of it is fun as well. And when you get somebody that you desperately want to come, that, you know, the email saying yes, they'll come, you know, that's an amazing feeling as well.
Yeah, I imagine it's really exciting if you're just waiting for it and then they confirm and you're like, oh, I've got them.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, in some ways, well, it's probably the second best bit. Apart from actually having them in Derby and saying, my God, you know, we've got the winner of the Booker Prize here. You know, she shared it. I mean, she never came, but hopefully she will do one day. But, you know, she shared the Booker Prize with Margaret Atwood, and she's sitting in Derby on the stage talking to us. You know, it's very exciting. Very exciting.
And what are the worst things about running a book festival?
Only the rejections. The rejections. You know, when you get that email through saying sorry, you think. And what if they cancel as well? If they cancel on you, I mean, that is horrible. That's awful.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. What are the most common reasons for rejection? I mean, that they tell you? Is it like clashes of timetable, you know, schedule and stuff?
They don't usually tell you. They just say, sorry, they can't make it. I mean, sometimes they do. They usually, I mean, they obviously probably make excuses, but I think certainly initially it would have been that nobody's heard of Derby.
Yeah.
What is Derby Book Festival? Why would I go to Derby Book Festival? So I do think that the fact that we've been around now for 6 years and that people do know, and also we're in the East Midlands and there aren't many other book festivals, literary festivals in the East Midlands, and they do want to get the authors all over the country. I think that's a benefit, obviously, but I think sometimes it is a clash. I mean, sometimes we've pitched at the wrong time, that they've stopped promoting that book because there's a gap between when the hardback comes out and the paperback, and they're actually not going to do any more events till the paperback comes out. So sometimes it's timing, sometimes it is a clash because they're doing loads of other events and they're going to Hay rather than us, because we do clash with Hay, only slightly, but you know, of course they're going to go to Hay rather than us.
Well, I was going to ask actually about that, the like your correlation or like work with other festivals. Like, do you sort of communicate with each other, or is it very much you're on your own sort of thing?
No, we do communicate with other festivals. I mean, not with Hay. You know, I'm sure they would not particularly be interested in sharing experiences because they would think our experiences are not the same as theirs. But you know, festivals that are of a similar size. I mean, we work closely with other festivals in the city, like the Folk Festival, the Poetry Festival, Edgelit, the Ghost Story Festival, you know, the ones that are at Quad. But also, you know, local festivals. We're in touch with Newark Festival. We've worked with, it's not terribly close, but we know them, Huddersfield Festival. They've got a literary festival, and it just so happens that their director comes from Derby. So we work with her. And Ilkley Festival, which is a bigger festival than ours, but they program very similar things to us, and we tend to look at their program to say, actually, yeah, they've got the same sort of things that we'd probably program, and we do aspire to be like. They've been going for about, I think, 25-30 years. One of the very first festivals. They've been very helpful, and generally other festivals are helpful to each other. And there is a network that we're on where you share ideas, and if you've got a problem, you say, is anybody got a policy on this, or you know, has anybody had this problem and how have you dealt with it? So there are people at the end of the phone, but it's there are 350 festivals. You can't possibly know them all.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and it does sound like, from what you are saying there, maybe the sort of smaller local festivals have a bit more interaction with each other.
Yes.
Because it's probably more feasible maybe than, like you said, the bigger ones that are just sort of these massive businesses almost to some extent. So my final question, this is a good one. Do you have any key advice for anyone who might be interested in starting a festival or hosting literary events generally?
Well, we were given a piece of advice in our very first year, we were very, very, very lucky that the first year of the festival, we hosted Radio 4's book club, which is a monthly programme where Jim Nocty interviews an author with an invited audience. You can apply, they're free, the tickets. You can apply for tickets, and they have an audience of about 20 people who all read the book and then ask questions. And they actually came out to Derby to record. It was recorded at Dada. And we were very lucky, Jenny and I were actually given the opportunity to go down to London to Broadcasting House to actually see an episode recorded. And it was absolutely fascinating. And Jim Notty said, if there's one piece of advice I'd give you, he said, look after your authors. And that absolutely stayed with us. And we do feel that we really do look after our authors. You know, once we know that they're coming, we make sure that they're picked up at the station, they're brought to the front door of the venue, they know exactly where they're going to be if they're staying the night. We make sure we get them to the hotel, we take them out for dinner if they're staying over generally. We escort them into the building, get them to the green room, get them refreshments. We really do look after them. And I think that has held us in good stead, because of course they go back saying, I had a great time. I mean, we have heard of authors who say, I've actually seen a tweet from an author saying, can anybody tell me where my event is tomorrow? Because they didn't even know.
Oh no.
And that would never ever happen as far as we're concerned. So we hope they get a good experience, because that's only going to help us in the future in getting an author next year from the same publicist. But it's also about planning. It's if you're going to do it, you've got to plan it properly. I mean, we do pride ourselves on putting on good quality events. We start on time. It all goes up, very carefully to time. We manage the queuing for the signing of the books well. The author's always got a pen. They know where they're sitting. We introduce them to the interviewer. They can have contact beforehand with the interviewer and discuss the interview. Not everybody does. Quite a lot of authors just like to turn up on the day and just wing it, because they think it's more spontaneous that way, and it's fresher. So I mean, it's about planning and really respecting the venue you're in, because they're not our venues, we're guests there. And making sure that all the volunteers know who they should speak to and how to deal with people as they come in, and give them a good welcome, so that the experience that people get at the venue is good. And the venue, people aren't saying, oh, I'd never go there again, that was a really badly run event. And because that actually impacts also on the venue, not just on the festival. So it's just about having high standards and planning everything very carefully, so that it's a good experience for everybody, for the volunteers, for the audience, for the authors, for the interviewer, for the venue.
And would you say then, sorry, this is my last question, would you say then the Derby Book Festival has created almost like a kind of community around it? Because that's what that kind of sounds like, everyone is sort of looking after each other.
I hope so. I mean, we like to think that it's a family. That's what we've got. It's a festival family. We talk about that, and we talk with our volunteers and our trustees. And if you think about it, that if you have that sort of idea about what the festival is, then hopefully everybody who comes to it will feel that they're having they're being welcomed, and they genuinely want it. So yes, I mean, I think that is really what we are trying to achieve. I mean, having a community of book lovers in the city.
Yeah. Well, that's a fab point to end on.
It is.
So much. It's a lovely point to end on. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. It's great to talk to you, and good luck.